All right, it's now 24 minutes to 8 o'clock, and we are on the political point and still looking at some of those intrigues that have hit the political scenario. And we now want to change gears and basically look at other aspects that have been happening politically, and that is to do with the handshake. And of course, after the handshake, there's been quite a number of things that have taken place. And there are certain, for instance, one of the episodes that we have seen is that of a push for some saying that there needs to be a creation of a prime minister position. There are others who basically say that that should not be the case. But let's listen into what has been said so far.
It was a church service that was supposed to end with a fundraiser for the Church of God in Mariakani South B. But the politics of a handshake between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga took center stage, with Deputy President William Ruto being on the receiving end.
Deputy President, we want you to be very patient. Please be patient. Because when 2022 comes, we are going to handle you. Because we know how we are going to deal with you.
And one way of ensuring national inclusivity is to have a referendum to change the structure of governance.
While touring the Rift Valley and Western regions on Saturday, the DP alongside politicians aligned to him rubbished any talk regarding constitutional referendum, which would aim to create more positions to accommodate other players in the government. But the members of parliament from the opposition insisted that the effects of that handshake can only be seen through constitutional change.
Kama unaona hii uwanja huwezi kukua, kaa kwa side, wacha wengine waingie kwa uwanja, wacha Raila Odinga na Uhuru Kenyatta waweze kupeleka Kenya where we wanted Kenya to be when we created the constitution.
We must take this opportunity to tell Raila Amolo Odinga asante sana for the courage you have taken. The man that you are. Ukakubali kuenda kusalimiana na President Uhuru. With these two presidents, Kenya is going to develop.
Ruto has been emphatic that he will not support any push for changes in law in order to create positions for individuals. But whereas many even among his supporters seem to appreciate the politics of the handshake, the details of what was discussed and agreed upon between Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta and the ultimate implementation of the same still continues to shake the political landscape.
Inalenga kuleta kabila zote pamoja kwa minajili ya kuleta amani na uwiano katika nchi yetu ya Kenya.
Ile tumechaguliwa, tumeingia kwenye viti, ati tunaanza tena, ati tuanze mjadala ingine ya kubadilisha katiba ndio wangwana wawili watatu wapate kazi ingine.
Besides attacking Deputy President William Ruto, the MPs did not have kind words for Moses Wetangula and Musalia Mudavadi, whom they accused of misleading the Luhya community.
Kwa ile kamati ya kuchagua ni nani atakuwa presidential candidate wa NASA, tulikuwa na watu 12. Kila chama ilitoa watu 3. Sasa kama Wetangula na Mudavadi walikuwa wanapenda Luhya unity, kwa nini hao watu 6 hawangepiga kura wachague Mudavadi ama Wetangula kuwa candidate wa NASA?
Mtu anaitwa Muluhya ako confused, lazima ombewe watuende pamoja. Kwa sababu Wajaluo wameshikana, Wakalenjin wameshikana. Kwa nini Muluhya tu ndiye hazishikana?
Although the Secretariat set up to look at the details of the agreement between President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga is yet to begin working, it is evident that the political landscape has been shaken. Shadrack Miti, KTN News.
All right, Mark, let me start with you. Is the premiership the way to go in terms of sorting out some of the problems that we have had?
Absolutely. I think that Kenya needs, first and foremost, a diverse look to what the executive is. We need to have more than 2 people at the top. That means have a non-executive prime minister whose primary role is to represent the executive in parliament. He should be able to answer questions in parliament on an ongoing basis, so he's available to parliament to answer questions. He sits in cabinet, he supervises other ministers, and therefore is able to give an answer. The question of whether this person will be appointed by the president or be voted in by parliament can be debated later. But the second thing that people are not talking about, which I think is more critical, We forget that if Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, and Wetangula do not run in 2022, then we are likely to have a candidate such as Kenneth Kaunda here, who does not have security detail. And he runs and he comes number 2 with 7 million votes out of a possible 25 million votes. Then this person is expected to go back and behave the way Uhuru behaves today. Single car, no sort of recognition, nothing. So he goes back to a vacuum. You are lucky today that Raila Odinga, being a former premier, is entitled to certain state trappings, and that gives him a level of dignity. What we need to do is dignify the person who comes second. I believe that he should be number 1 on his party list for either Senate or Parliament and be the de facto leader of the minority or majority, depending on how his party has done. The reason we need to do this is then when you look at state power and the checks and balances between state and the legislature, is you'll be able to see between the president and the premier 5 people that represent the face of Kenya and the leaders of opposition looking like the face of Kenya. That is what you need. However, and I'd like to caution on this, the face of Kenya is not Luhya unity. We don't need Luhya unity to vote as a bloc. We are not sheep. The age of parties that sound like a cousins meeting, Wekesa, Nyongesa, Wepuhulu, and Wetangula in one party, needs to end. That is not, Ford Kenya cannot be counted as a national party. It is a Bukusu party. Call it Ford Bukusu, and let's move on. We cannot stand in this nation to have parties that are based on our tribes.
The parties have been formed on those lines, and well, leaders have allowed that to continue, so they continue to be tribal parties, as opposed to be national parties.
And that's the problem. You see, the Democratic Party at one point believed in slavery. They have since changed. They were, at one point, believed in the segregation of peoples based on skin color. They have changed. It is archaic. It is the most xenophobia way of thinking to say that Musalia Mudavadi and Wetangula can sit together in a high meeting with sober minds and decide that the solution for Kenya is Luhya unity. That is nonsense. We need national unity.
All right, Joe, let me come to you on the premiership and the way to go. Of course, we'll come to the political parties and the fact that one can argue as to whether they are political, they're national parties or they're just tribal cocoons.
Yeah, we will actually talk about, I like the direction it's taking on political parties, but now let's talk about the premiership. I have suggested before that we need the premier position in Kenya. This is to take away the central power. The power is too centralized. There's concentration of power in the presidency. It's a winner-takes-it-all situation, and therefore that raises the stakes in every election. So that's why we're having the 2022 talks as early as now. It's very unfortunate that instead of focusing on development and issues that are really bedeviling this country, we're already talking about 2022. We're already talking about a referendum. We're already talking about political realignments. Mudavadi and Wetangula are already talking about Luhya unity. It's unfortunate. And the only solution is, let's take away the stakes from elections. Therefore, elections will just be kind of a formality, whereby we are sure that certain 2 people will be in government, and they will be making decisions based on constitutional requirement, because it won't be by virtue of somebody appointing you to that position. It will be by virtue that you are voted into office. When you have a hybrid system, then you take away center of power, then we will devolve power. We already have devolution, which has already helped a lot, a great deal. But we've left a lot of power still at the level of the presidency. Let's also devolve the power from the presidency, take it to the premier, who can oversee government functions, and then the president can be the head of state. And then we can have a proper and a more coordinated government functions. But the way we are right now, we're going to have the same issue every 5 years. We're going to be finishing elections and coming to this show the same way we are sitting right now and talking about
the
politics.
Same things. All right, Honorable Oluoch, I think your stand is already known. We've even seen one of the clips there on the direction that we should take as a country. But one might also argue that devolution was actually supposed to come and somehow remove some of this power and pressure from the presidency and take it to the counties, because that's where the services really need to be rendered.
I agree. But also, you know, the Constitution is a living document, and it is something that we needed to give room and see how it works. And the way it has worked is that, to a large extent, devolution has dispersed power, but there is still a lot of power centralized in central government, and you see this in the sense in which they disperse and hold the county governments at ransom in the disbursements of funds. County governments at the beginning of this year didn't have salaries from December up to around March to pay. And even when that money is given, it's given in bits. So devolution has done what it needs to do, but there is still a lot of work to be done in terms of how we can disperse this power down. And where the idea of creating a premiership will come in is that it will further disperse this power in two senses. That we have had a sense of exclusion where once the presidential election ends, the rest of the country, other than two, feel that they are left out in the cold. That has to be done, and I want to disagree with the William Ruto that the constitution cannot be changed to suit two people. This is not about two people. This is about, and in two successive elections we've seen that after that election, there is so much tension and half of the country, 5 million people, do not move on for close to about 4 years, and then you get to another election cycle. That has to be sorted. And the one thing that I want to say about this handshake in this context is this, and on a light note. From my side of the coalition, we usually say that there are 3 rules. The first rule is that Baba is always right. The second rule is that Baba is never wrong. Rule number 3 is that in any doubt, refer to rule number 1 and number 2. Either way, Baba is always right. So when Baba said left, we went left. When he said right, right. We went right. When he said handshake, we now do handshake. But I'm surprised. I thought Uhuru Kenyatta was also, that rule should exist in that side of the coalition. So when Uhuru says handshake, and then number 2 says other things, then we must start asking questions about
but the truth, Honorable Oluoch, is that we are not very clear on the details of that handshake. That is still a mystery to all of us. And therefore, when you say that when Baba says right and everybody went right, we're not clear right in which direction and what exactly constitutes right or left.
There are 2 ways of looking at this. As number 2, my view is that you cannot hold unless you resign a contrary opinion from your president. That presidency is one, and I think William Ruto ought to take lessons for the former President Moi. President Moi became president because as vice president, he knew that you cannot try to be your own person. You must toe the line and fuata that nyayo. Now I think Gideon Moi is saying tunafuata mguu ya ng'ombe.
But Uhuru Kenyatta has not said that premiership is the way to go.
Deputy president should fuata mguu ya Uhuru Kenyatta if that is the mguu that he needs to fuata.
But on what grounds would you say he's not fuatering? Maybe he is fuatering. Maybe he is aware.
I think you need to look at this way. William Ruto watched the handshake from the windows of Harambee House.
Like all of us.
And then he sent a text, which I think was mischievous, saying, na congratulate our Wangwana. And he did that for a while until they let the cat out of the bag after these issues started coming out like, hey, anyway, this thing, 2022 may be going out. So then they decided to go all out in attack of the handshake. And they did. In the last, I think the Bureti Member of Parliament's homecoming, they clearly went out. And then they keep saying that mambo ya 2022 tuache. But the person leading the 2022 agenda and will make it impossible for Uhuru Kenyatta to deliver and to create a legacy and to put in place his big 4 is the deputy president. Because every place he goes, in the charade of unveiling some things, they talk 2% about tumefungua hii and then talk about William Ruto in 2022. Uhuru Kenyatta cannot be a dark president and held hostage at the 2022 campaign of Ruto.
I don't think that Uhuru Kenyatta is a lame duck president in regards to succession politics in 2022. In fact, he has spoken himself that he is quite willing to hand over to William Ruto, which is an interesting sign. And the reason why I say this is an interesting sign is I think for Uhuru Kenyatta and indeed for Raila Odinga, they've finally come to the realization that one of the legacies they must leave behind is a strong political party. You can see Raila Odinga moving hard and fast to strengthen ODM. You can see Uhuru Kenyatta trying to strengthen Jubilee, because at the end of the day, if your legacy is going to stand the test of time, you need a vehicle that will continue to propagate your ideals beyond your own political existence. And therefore, I think we need to read the statements from William Ruto very carefully. William Ruto is doing a bargain, and this is the bargain. He is most likely, right now, the leading contender for 2022. His power of his presidency is what we are discussing today. We are discussing whether to reduce the amount of clout he has and subject it to a premier. Now, if you're going to be negotiating from a strong position, the rules of negotiation force you to take the most strong position before. So it is to his benefit that he comes out today and says, no, I don't want a prime minister. So that what happens is his compromised position after the negotiations have taken place comes into the position where he has probably, and this is probably what he wants, a non-executive premier and a premier which he gets to appoint. If he is given that power, I promise you, I'm sure he'll change his song. But being the biggest stakeholder in 2022, I promise you that until the negotiation table comes, I can predict for free for every Kenyan, William Ruto will fight it to the hilt. Why? Because he's the one whose power immediately looking into the future we are looking to cut in.
And time is going to either prove you right or wrong. But now still in Uasin Gishu, Deputy President William Ruto reiterated that he does not support calls for constitutional referendum. The DP calls for a creation of Prime Minister post are misplaced. He says that they are misplaced. Let's just listen into what he had to say.
Deputy President William Ruto moved to consolidate his support in the North Rift region amid a whiff of political temperatures in the country. Speaking during the homecoming of Trade Principal Secretary Dr. Chris Kiptoo at Chepkosom area in Uasin Gishu County, the DP said the succession talks about the change of the constitution to create, among others, the position of a powerful prime minister was a misplaced priority.
Kuna wengine wanafikiria ya kwamba eti tumeungana ndio tupange viti ya watu wadosi wagawane viti. Ati tubadilishe katiba ndio wadosi wapate. My friends, mimi nataka niwaambie mchana mapema. Ile ushirikiano tunatafuta Kenya sio kwa manufaa ya wadosi, ni kwa manufaa ya wananchi milioni 45, hasa vijana mamilioni ambao hawana nafasi ya kufanya kazi.
Ruto said that it is Kenyans who have the mandate to elect leaders of their choice and not a few individuals with selfish interests.
Hiyo tunawaambia, my friends, nyinyi mnaishi kwa dunia ingine. Kenyans have the capacity to elect their own leaders. They do not need a few of us to go and sit in a corner over a cup of tea ati tukubaliane nani atakuwa executive prime minister ati aendeshe serikali ya Kenya.
2022 politics took center stage with area leaders accusing section of the Kalenjin leaders of rocking the Jubilee party from within.
Mimi nilienda kusalamia mzee mstaafu Daniel Moi na aliwasalamia sababu nilienda kumuona akitoka hospitali na nikasema ni vizuri pia mimi niende nimjulie hali namna gani. Kwa hivyo aliwasalamia na ako hali mzuri, ako sawa. Na vile vile tulikuwa na Gideon Moi na aliwasalamia, angekuwa na sisi hapa lakini angeweza kufika.
Mimi nilikuwa naona huyu mbunge hapa Gure Turen anakupatia wewe lecture.
Hiyo story mnatuambia. Number 2, Deputy President alipita hiyo title ambayo mnataka kumpatia ya kusema he is a leader of the Kalenjin. Huko alipita kitambo.
Blame games on who should take responsibility on farmers' challenges played itself on Sunday in front of the DP, even as he announced an additional of 2 billion shillings for maize farmers.
Angalia maneno mingi na mimi nikiwa mjumbe wenyu, mimi msiseme nasikia wenzangu wanasema nalalamika. Silalamiki kwa kiti yeyote. Hii siasa ni siasa, hakuna kulalamika. Hata kama sikupewa bado niko na mdomo, ndugu zangu.
Na wakati akimaliza analipa viongozi washike matawi wafanye maandamano ndio serikali ichukue pesa nyingine aende anunue mahindi Tanzania akuja supply ati ako na shamba 60 acres yenye inaweza lete over 100,000 bucks. Wewe waacha bwana, wacheni kutumiwa na brokers.
Ile pesa tuko nayo ya serikali ni pesa ya kulipa mkulima. Sio pesa ya kulipa broker na mfanyibiashara na wakora. Hapo lazima tuelewane.
Last week, farmers were up in arms over delayed payments for maize deliveries and lack of fertilizer. Although the government has promised to resolve these issues, farmers in Uasin Gishu are still waiting, and time is of the essence. Elvis Kosgei, KTN News, Uasin Gishu County.
All right, Joe Kaunda, as we now come to the tail end of this segment, your thoughts on the Deputy President's thought, or could he be like Bichachi saying, posturing to a point where you're at the position of power and therefore you need to protect that and ensure that you have political capital when that debate begins?
Now, let's demystify this issue from the handshake to what Ruto was saying. If we're getting it into context, Ruto is in power right now. And Ruto wields a lot of power in government as we speak. At some point, I even thought that Uhuru is a student of Ruto when it comes to dealing with political dissent. And I believe so. Ruto is a witty and a very sharp politician. And Ruto knows how to negotiate. One thing I'm an ODM supporter, our party leader doesn't know how to do. I believe that Ruto can negotiate quite well. And it starts quite early. He has started this negotiation already right now. He's doing his negotiation properly in a very aligned manner. He's telling the Kenyans that we do not need a referendum, but he knows perfectly well that he has interests that he will need to keep when he gets into power, which is very clear right now. So he's telling Raila and Uhuru, and this is more of holding them to hostage, you know. He's telling them we don't need a referendum right now because we cannot give two people jobs, something that he has said before. So Ruto wants to keep Raila out of the equation, but Ruto is sure of bagging all the other leaders because he knows that without Raila in the equation, he is going to the presidency free and fair. So he's beginning the negotiation and is setting the table right now. And he is setting it quite well. And if people are not careful, and this is now where we have to go to the details of the handshake. We need to know what were the details of the handshake. What was the pact? Because right now, as it is, who is benefiting? Ruto is benefiting 100%, and not Raila. Even though Uhuru does not have so much interest, I believe that the negotiation was tilted towards Uhuru. But Uhuru does not have a preferred candidate. Sorry, he has Ruto, of course. He wants to handle.
Yes, he has mentioned
Ruto. Yeah, he has mentioned that's Ruto, yes. But he's leaving. He doesn't really care so much about what's going to happen. And when he's talking about legacy, I want to be clear that there is no legacy that these people are so concerned about, apart from continuity of the dynasties.
All right. Honorable Oluoch, your thoughts on Raila's future, especially in this? There's been a narrative or a thought that he might be almost indicating that he may not be going for the 2022 presidency by, you know, the handshake and the fact that now we've seen him, you know, go to see Moi. Of course, details are that he went to see Moi because Moi was ailing. But there are those also who feel that in Kenya, this handshake thing has become, it's no longer just a handshake. There is a lot, you know, that you could attach to that handshake.
There is. I was listening to, as I answered your question yesterday, to Rubia when he was interviewed on the question of Matiba. And he had this interesting story about belling the cat. And the interviewer, we was asking, what is it that you're belling? And so he gave this story about these cats and the rats. And there was an issue about this cat, which was a very big menace for them. So they said, we are going to deal with this cat. But nobody would come out and say, who's going to bell the cat? So I think the person who has decided, or the two people who have decided that they're going to confront the cat and to bell it, I think are the two leaders. And I think Raila Odinga bears the bigger responsibility of belling this cat. I think he could do it in two ways. One, where he is right now, where you don't know really what he's thinking, so you don't have the opportunity to undo him. But they have given us an inkling into what they're dealing with. I think there is a question of where we're coming from. There is the issue of exclusivity. So that let's try and deconstruct government and opportunities. And if you go back to our core Kenya draft, we are concentrating too much on the premiership. But go look at the core Kenya draft, which IEBC then shot down. There was a provision that no more than 30% of positions in government, both horizontal and vertical, should go to one community. So that let's take an audit. Let all communities, including the list in terms of numerical numbers, be able to find a place in the civil service and in the non-governmental organization, non-state actors. This is one of the ways of trying to ensure that there is a buy-in and everybody feels they feel part of this cake. You look at other provisions, and I've said this before when I was starting, that we need to create, we need to strengthen the oversight role of Parliament and have cabinet secretaries or ministers who are more accountable. I think this is something that also is at the center of his mind when you're talking about this. There is a cycle of violence and stolen election. It is on the table. So I think even though we don't know the devil in the detail, I think they already gave us an idea of what it is. His Excellency Raila Odinga could play two roles. That he could be the person who transits us through this process and leave Kenya in a place where we never again have to go back to where we have been in the last 3 cycles. But then again, he could also be the Mandela, the one-term president as he exits or reaches the sunset of his political career. So I will not rule out that Raila Odinga
could be in the ballot for 2022. All right, we'll wait and see. Mark Bichachi, we're out of time. Your closing comments.
The man to watch in the next 4 years is still going to be Raila Odinga, because whether he runs or not, he is going to determine whether Ruto becomes president or not. That's the funny thing. If he throws his weight behind a certain candidate and gets his traditional ODM vote, which spans across this country, to support this candidate, whether that candidate is William Ruto or someone else, then we have to watch Raila Odinga. If Raila Odinga stands to run for election again he becomes the man to watch. What is important, therefore, is to consider what are the interests that Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga want to put in place, A, for themselves, and B, for this country. And I want to correct my friend and tell him that the reality of the matter, even if you want to protect a dynasty, it comes to a point where you realize it is not a guarantee that your daughter or your son will inherit from you. You therefore need to build institutions that will carry on your ideals into perpetuity. That is what is called altruistic egoism, where you do the right thing for selfish reasons. Either way, the right thing is being done. And one of the best things about being in this period in history in Kenya is we have a blank check to fill in whatever we want for the Kenya that we want. Every Kenyan today should take advantage of that. Let's reimagine our politics, reimagine our economy, reimagine corruption, reimagine tribalism, and come up with a state that can work for
Joe Kaunda, your closing comments?
My closing comments should be very straightforward. I think that the period for political innuendos should come to an end, and sometimes we need to calm down as a country and speak about things that are affecting this country. The country is degenerating in terms of education. You look at education, health, security, and all other issues. I like the 7 or the 8-point agenda that Raila and His Excellency the President came up with, and there was corruption, there was inclusivity, there was national ethos, I believe that those are very viable points, but the problem is one. Are we going to move from the paper into action? And that's where we should be right now. We should be moving right now from whatever they wrote into action. Let's see a proper step and design and institutional change into achieving these things that were put on paper. Even if there is no position that's created, we don't need a position, but we need these things to happen such that in the next election, we're not going to have the stakes so high that people are going to kill themselves.
All right, Honorable Oluoch, your closing comments?
2 messages. One is to His Excellency the President, Uhuru, and then to Raila Odinga. Where they are, they've taken a gigantic step in history, but it's also like seizing the tail of a wild beast. They must wrestle this beast to the ground. If they don't, it will not only devour the two of them and the legacy that they want to create, it will devour the rest of Kenya, and we will never recover in 100 years. To William Ruto, I think one of the best lessons from history is to adopt Moi style. I think he's doing well at negotiations, like my colleague has said, but he could do it without being abrasive. He could end up where some people have always said of Raila Odinga, the Raila-phobia and the Raila mania. If he ends up being hated too much, he limits the room through which he may be able to woo other people not in his corner right now. So I think that he needs to relook his style. He needs to toe the line and follow the Nyayo or the Muguu ya Ng'ombe, as it were.
Thank you very much, Honorable Oluoch. We're going to wind up right there. That's Honorable Anthony Oluoch, Member of Parliament for Mathare. We have Mark Bichachi and Joe Kaunda, who are political analysts. Thank you for joining us this morning and basically weighing in onto the political point. It is now 6 minutes after 8. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be looking at your money.